Welcome back to another How to Succeed podcast. And I am your host, Mike Montague, and head of franchise strategy at Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training. For more information, go to sandler.com. My guest this week is Carol Bowser. She's with Conflict Management Strategies. You can find her at managingconflict.com. Keeping it simple this morning. Good stuff. We're going to talk about how to succeed at de-escalating conflict. Here we go. All right, Carol. Tell us about de-escalating conflict and what we're talking about here today. I'm assuming a lot of people would like to de-escalate their conflict or avoid it if possible, but that's kind of like an easier said than done title today. What do you think?
It is, because oftentimes, like when we're thinking like the conflict has been escalated or the conversation is tense or really nervous about it, or maybe even like we're looking to start a conversation and we're getting a vibe from the other person of like, okay, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'm sensing resistance, I'm sensing opposition, I'm sensing, and who the HE double hockey sticks are you? And I always think about it of like, okay, we can do things to try to manage the emotional climate in the conversation. I think about talking in like creating microclimates. You know, in gardening, I'm up in the Pacific Northwest, and if you're a gardener at all, you got lots of microclimates. And you know, and for sales and for leaders and for managers and people, there are lots of little multiple microclimates that you can create, and the microclimate might depend on who is showing up and how is showing up. So thinking about how, if it gets escalated, how we can rack it down a little bit, but even more kind of like in the garden analogy of like, what is it you're doing to prepare for the conversation so that way you don't get into an escalated conversation?
Yes, I love that. And I think what you said too, I talk about this a lot with Sandler stuff, is that there are a lot of different difficult conversations that we need to have. So
Yeah.
if you're a manager, it could be firing somebody or having, performance conversations. Sometimes it's even personal stuff that they're bringing into the workplace. So you have to bring up, and those can get heated, or people can take those personally really quick. And sales, we're having conversations about how they're affected personally in this situation, and there's a lot of pain involved, and sometimes people can lose it a little bit or create some difficulty in those challenges. In customer success or customer service, you basically only get conflict management conversations, because people don't call up customer service to say, hey, thanks for delivering my bags on time, everything was perfect.
Right? Exactly. I talk about some of my clients, who are HR professionals or, IT managers or something. Like, no one calls up HR to say, hey, my paycheck hit. Awesome. No one said the computer and the lights got turned on because somebody paid the electrical bill. Good on ya. Yeah, it is really interesting. And here's the thing, particularly for sales professional or customer services, or if you are a boss or trying to lead people, or if you are someone's kind of trusted advisor or a mentor or a trusted colleague, the good thing is they're coming to you, and in sales and customer service, it is an opportunity to be able to show up for those people. And let's be honest here. Sometimes like what they want is not within the realm of possibility. It's a little might be wackadoodle. However, here's a de-escalation technique, is that you're saying it might not be within the realm of possibility at this moment, or, I don't see how, given what the current events are here, what you're talking about, or that, quite frankly, I only have so much authority here to be able to, address this. And then maybe one of the proactive de-escalation techniques of saying, let me think about this. Who may be able to give us some insight as to how we might address this problem versus the no. I don't know about you. Have you ever been to some place and you're getting like really poor customer service? And I am usually very chipper. I'm very empathetic. I try to make requests instead of demands and show appreciation that if it's really busy or something like that. But if someone just says, the kitchen's really backed up, I'm like, you know what? Don't tell me why I'm getting bad customer service. Tell me how you're going to fix it. I mean, kind of acknowledge the problem, but then say, okay, and this is what we're going to do, the steps. And if you can't fix it, what are we going to do to mitigate it? I mean, I think, for sales, you get that. And again, for sales, if they're calling you No, okay, here's a little side note. If sales and marketing and procurement aren't all in alignment, there's going to be conflict among all of those. And if sales calls procurement or calls warranty and goes, "Hey, my customer's griping about this. What are you guys going to do about it?" It kind of is a little bit of a shaming and blaming versus like, "Hey, my customer's got a concern. um, they're calling me because I've got a chance to build a relationship with this. How can I work with you to be able to address the concern?" And by the way, the customer's concerned, they're a little bit finicky. They like to push back just to see what they can get. Let me kind of tell you a little bit about the customer and we can try to figure out a way to be able to address it. And sometimes if the answer is still no, how can we make it a graceful no that we end up having a long-term relationship with this customer?
I appreciate you sharing it that way, but let's be honest. It's the customer success team calling the salesperson saying, "You promised what? I have to deliver this now. I have
At this
I'm
price, at this
using my
schedule,
there,
are you nuts?"
but some stereotypes are true. No, let's talk about the ideal attitude here for de-escalating conflict, because I think you've already hinted at it there, but sometimes we escalate it and we turn up the conflict by some of the things that we're trying to do to resolve it. So you gave, some examples of bad customer service, but I think about, having to be on hold and them repeatedly telling me every 30 seconds their call is important to me.
Yeah.
And you're like, no. And once maybe fine, but every 30 seconds for the next 20 minutes is not okay. That's creating more conflict. So by the time I get somebody on the phone, I'm already more heated than I was before. Are there any other common misconceptions or things that people do to try to maybe minimize the problem, and what they actually do is increase that conflict?
Absolutely. So what I've seen and I've heard is people will do really kind of placating and minimizing things. Don't worry about it. Just calm down. Or in the example of the innumerable customer service. And as a side note, have you ever noticed that you're on for a little while and they'll come back and say our call is important to you, but the longer that you've been on, I found that the more frequently they start repeating that message, and I'm like, I don't care. You're interrupting my listening to a podcast right now with this constant reminding of it.
Right.
And I think to your point in that example, it's kind of a depersonalization. It's like, what, it's PR is what that is. I think the things that, again, as a side note, what's more helpful is, kind of this is your estimated wait time. And it's that the people are dealing with complex issues or they're understaffed. And so pooping on somebody who is already doing hard work is not helpful. And if we come and so they're trying to kind of, thank you very much. And they have a script. I mean, so one thing, let's just recognize if there are parameters and scripts that people are compelled to do, let's just not get pissed at them that they're compelled to do it. However, if it's like, hey, just calm down, or, it is what it is, I can't really do anything about it. Let's not minimize their experience. Let's just kind of acknowledge and again, if it's a customer service line, I'm not sure if you're allowed to say, I'm really sorry for the wait time. We're understaffed or anything
Yeah,
like
so let's
that.
maybe move away from that bad example, because we're not going to fix Fortune 500 companies' customer service. I don't even know if most of them don't even have 800 numbers anymore. But when we're in a sales conversation with a prospect, or we're working with a small business, I do think you've already mentioned two things: depersonalization, saying everybody has this, or the one I hate is this is our policy. And you're like, well, my policy is to not get taken advantage of. So we got a policy standoff here.
Yeah.
and I'm right
I
with you.
agree. And to highlight
And
that
then
as a
minimizing
former,
is the other one you mentioned too, that I wanted to highlight for everybody, is like saying, oh, no worries, we're going to get taken care of right away, or that's not a big deal. And trying to explain why it's not a big deal doesn't help your customer.
no. And what you're doing is you're highlighting the problem. And if you're saying it's not a big deal and you're like, well, it may not be a big deal from your end because as a business owner, it's not your time, it's not your money, it's not your reputation. Especially for the small business owner, they are highly, highly involved, and they may be the face of the company, and they may be dealing with disgruntled customers and disgruntled employees. So along the lines of, if you can just say that a complaint is nothing more than a request in disguise. I think that that's really interesting, and that is how you can prepare for it. If there may be a complaint, but people don't know how to make direct and respectful requests of each other. So what they will do is they will complain, they will gripe, they will shame and blame. So I look at it like, I'm trying to get beyond that of, kind of what's the underlying issue here. And if in my head I think, well, a complaint is nothing more than a request in disguise, and then it's like, okay, I need to listen for what the request is, and then I can repeat back, okay, what I'm understanding, this is your need, and this is kind of what your request is. Or another way that I frame that is, okay, let me understand it in the sales thing. Okay, this is your counter proposal, or this is your proposal. Because if it's a binary that is like, no, I can't do that, that's not the policy, then, salespeople know, let's kind of get underneath it and let's kind of find out, okay, well, what about that request or that proposal or that demand or that complaint? What need is that trying to serve? And your salespeople know that. You're looking for needs, you're looking for points of pain. But no, if you drive up points of pain, then you're getting them in that stress response, and then they're getting pissed, and then they're going for a binary answer. So in as much as, let me frame that in my head of any complaint or any blaming or shaming is nothing more than a request in disguise. And that request could be icky. It can be very, very assertive. It could even be going toward aggressive and maybe have an underlying threat in it. But okay, let me just take it as a request. Let me make sure that I understand your request and the secondary request and some of the challenges that you have. So you're not getting sucked into it. And the thing is, it's so tempting to get sucked into it.
I love what you said there for two things in particular. One is making it non-emotional, that you're saying it rather than hearing this thing. I think sometimes people do just need to dump, and they just need to tell you how upset they are, and then they can go on with the conversation, but they want you to understand where they are first. So letting them dump is great, but seeing that emotional side of their conversation as what they're making as a counter proposal to what has happened so far is a really great intellectual way to kind of stay unemotionally engaged in this conversation, and to think about how you can respond in an adult manner to those emotions with another proposal. That takes me to the second point you made, which I think is really great for everybody, is one of these non-binaries, yes or no situations. That's one of my favorite things. I like to think I'm good at it. So I want to hear what you have for strategies and behaviors to kind of prepare for these. I'm thinking that in some of our stuff, we prepare for tough negotiations when we know going into it, with some concessions and other things that we can give. So we have creative solutions before we even go into a sales call. But I'm wondering if you have any other tips, because I love the idea of it's not going to be a yes or no. Like, let's find a way out of this together that's a compromise and a solution that both people can agree on.
Correct. And I will say that a lot of my clients will say, like, we want more collaboration. And if there is a business owner or a manager or something like that, it's like, okay, if I can't do it this way or to the extent, what's a workaround that we can do it? So for example, I work with regulated industries. They're like, yeah, the regulation doesn't allow us to do that. And we really love your business, but we're not going to get fined and we're not going to get shut down. So being able to say, rather than, okay, let me back up 1 second. When people say like, hey, well, what can I do for you? What can I help you with? That is setting you up for a binary answer. I can't do that. Whatever. Because one of the things when you say that, you are implying that you actually have the power to do what they want to. And in an organization, you may not have the power. You may have the title, you may not have the power, you may not have the social capital, you may not have the time, you may not have the energy, you may not have the budget. And to be able to reframe it of saying, help me understand what kind of help you're looking for here. And you're implying that it's a little bit more exploratory, and you're not setting yourself up for a binary answer. And it may be like, I'm not sure we can do that, but let's figure out what we can do. Or we need to bring somebody else into the conversation. And I'm going to link this to internal pieces too, because how you do your work or how you manage people, unless you're a solopreneur by yourself, an organization, if you change one thing, a system or process, a timing or a request, it is likely going to impact other areas. And also, if you have multiple different managers, it's like, well, Carol allows us to do that, but why doesn't Mike allow us to do that? You kind of set people off. So being able to say, don't worry about it, mind your own beeswax. Here's another one. Stay in your own lane. Yikes.
I like that a lot. I like that opening question and reframing the discussion, because a lot of times we do get into situations, and I think this is our kind of behavior portion of the podcast, where we're talking about what can we do before, during, and after to de-escalate the conflict. So before is even setting up these conversations that we're not allowing them to make a yes or no request. We're allowing them to make a proposal or suggestions. That's a really great framework. During, we mentioned a couple of things, of questions and ways we can reverse, but I want to hear more about that and what you think we could do after as well, to kind of, or maybe even earlier, to prevent conflict and things, because I think these are really important strategies.
Yeah, I think it's very much similar to the sales of like, what do you know about your customer and their particular quirks? What's important to them? And the other thing is like, what are they trying to get out of the meeting? And I will tell you, I am always super reluctant to phrase things in terms of a win. But for a reason I'll get into in a second. But if you say, what are they looking for a win? But if we can reframe it to what kind of goals or potential goals do they have for this? I mean, is it building a relationship? Are they looking for a concession? Are they looking for greater education? Are they trying to get information to us so that way they can explain to their tertiary negotiating partners, their boss, their spouse, their subordinates, of why they did things like that? So trying to make assumptions and then have questions prepared to test those assumptions beforehand, of being able to kind of look for it. And I know in sales, you're thinking, okay, Carol, of course we're going to do this. It's perfectly fine. And even in customer service, like we make certain assumptions of why people are addressing customer service. And then we have some scripts to be able to address that. However, let's look at that within internal working relationships or with other customers, of saying, what are the possible goals that they might have for the conversation. And a lot of people don't have specific goals. They just want to vent, or they just want to have a conversation. So this goes to kind of what happens after of, are you doing a little bit of a sanity check of saying, okay, this is kind of what I thought our goals were at the beginning of the conversation. I think we've covered this, and these are my action items that I am going to do as a result of that. You would not believe how many things I have worked with where early on in my mediation and my conflict resolution career, it's like the conversation went really good. Everybody's really great. And I'll say, hey, do you need a summary, or do we need something, to memorialize this? And they're like, no, we got it. And then 2 weeks later, it blows up because someone says, well, they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And then, and then I call them like, well, I was waiting for them to do what they were supposed to because I don't really trust them. And then so have some way to memorialize that with action items. And I'll go back to the win thing, that if we keep saying we're looking for a win, a lot of people means I win, meaning I am crushing you, I am defeating you. It's once again kind of a win-lose, a binary piece. And I like to be able to kind of reset some expectations of, what are workable solutions. And in my profession, people say we're looking for a win-win. I'm like, I think that might be setting the bar kind of high, because when you're looking for a win, it kind of sets like aspirational, I want it cheap and custom and quick. Well, bless your heart. Yeah. Let's look for something different. So even kind of beforehand, and thinking about the client, about what their goals are and then being able to kind of look at expectations and see what you can do to maybe kind of take them out for, we're looking for a win, we're looking to crush it, to, okay, honestly, what's reasonable, because people don't like to be viewed as a mile marker on somebody else's success journey.
Yeah. And you reminded me a lot too, in this escalation, de-escalation, that it usually is a process. I mean, that might happen pretty quick with some personalities or tense situations, but when we're thinking about our behavior before, during, and after, and what our goals and plans are, it really is I think the more you communicate up front, if you know there's going to be a problem, the earlier on this escalator that you get on, the better chance you have of like kind of flattening the curve, like they were talking about with COVID, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's not going to be as serious. But if you wait until the last minute, or you don't tell them about the problem and then it blows up in your face, now you're going to have to try to de-escalate quickly on a steep curve. And then after these meetings, same thing. If you follow up regularly and you take these actions, you're preventing the problem. But sort of these gaps, the longer they go with tension, the more it's likely to escalate, right? They don't necessarily go away a lot of the times. They get stronger because there's uncertainty, and uncertainty makes people fearful, and that triggers emotions.
Yeah, and I think everybody recognizes that people are busy and there are gaps, in getting back to people. And one of the things that I look and listen for is if how many and thens are there? And then,
Mhm.
and then, and then. And it's not just the one thing, but it is the accumulation of a lot of things. And here's something for your listeners. A lot of people may view something as a one-off event, like, hey, I had to wait an hour to be able to get onto you, or we had this meeting and then something came up and you canceled, and then you had to cut it short last minute and things like this. So sometimes just being able to get the time to talk about things and get a response adds to it. And the old adage of conflict, unlike fine wine, doesn't age well. In fact, most of the wine that you purchase now isn't designed to age well at all. It's designed to be
No.
consumed. So thinking about that. And then the other thing that I think about in that kind of during is how far back does the narrative go? Because if it goes back far, then you're not dealing with a one-off event, and you may be assuming it's a one-off event. Oh, okay, we got that and it got taken care of. Next thing happens, we got that taken care of. Other people will look at it as an ongoing narrative. And my former employment lawyer brain goes to the legal term about the totality of the circumstances. So being able to
Mm.
look at this in preparations for these conversations, or even during the conversations of, it's like, are you looking at it of what's happened in the last 90 days, or are we looking more something very specific in the last 6 weeks? 6 weeks, 90 days, about those, like 6 days. And then the other thing, the longer that you hear it, it's like, then you're not dealing with a one-off event to be fixed. It's a pattern of events. And then you're going to have to look at it as a pattern events. And if they're describing it as a pattern, means it is an ongoing injury. And they are
That's a
going
lot
to
more
say it like it's
trust.
an
Yeah.
ongoing injury.
Yeah, it's a lot more trust to rebuild. It's a lot more long-term solutions then. One phone call isn't gonna fix it, right? If we've missed 5 phone calls before that and stuff. I think that's really great. That's the old, straw that broke the camel's back analogy. But I think we do need to understand how many stairs they've walked up on this escalator, right? Is this the first time we've messed it up, or is this the 10th time? And understanding where our partner in this conflict is a really important issue. And I highlighted it earlier, but I wanted to circle back too. Is in Sandler we call this the upfront contract, and that it's like shining a light out as far as you can in what's going to happen to them. And as long as they are clear and they can see the light, they feel safe. But when they get past deadlines, when we don't call when we say we would, that's when they go into the dark and they start getting more and more nervous and more into the dark here. So if I say, hey, Carol, I'll call you tomorrow at 8 o'clock, you're fine until tomorrow at 8 o'clock, or at least as it gets closer, you're like, oh, 7:45. I should probably prepare for Mike's call. And then 7:55, you're thinking, oh, is he going to call early? 7:59, is this it? Is he on? And then soon at 8:05, more tension. 8:15, he stood me up. 8:30, he's dead to me. And all of a sudden, like, that event horizon created this escalation of anxiety that we missed. And as long as we can keep setting these upfront agreements and we can keep living up to those expectations, we never let that escalator go up another step. And
Yeah.
that's such an important
And
aspect.
for you, if like in your, and anyone who everybody makes choices, and they're going to assume that their choices are rational and that other people would make the same choices in their position, which is not true.
Mm.
And if you're thinking, well, yeah, but they'll understand, or yeah, but this came up, or yeah, but, I jokingly, it's like, yeah, but the rabbit, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. And if you're hearing all of that, what other people hear is minimizing, full of excuses, not accountable, not taking responsibility, or that they're not understanding. And one thing as well is, this doesn't have to, this may be some of your best customers or some of your best employees or some of your best vendors who may be just suffering from benign neglect. And it might just be, hey, I just wanted to call to check in. And then you're like, oh, it's not a big deal, just calling to check in. However, that is a very easy way to be able to enter into a conversation. And then they'll say, and while we're here, I want to talk to you about this. So that might be their way of easing into a conversation. So being able to recognize maybe some of the quieter people, some of maybe the folks that don't take a lot of attention when they call, is probably something pretty, that they want to talk about.
Yeah, to add on to that, some of those yeah buts might not even be yours. That it could have been the person in your position before you, or the competitor they were using last year stood them up on calls, or maybe 3 other people in their lives ditched out that day, and they're just feeling like it's them and not you. And so a lot of other emotions and triggers, like, you might not be the one pushing them up the escalator. It could be somebody else, your competitor, or somebody else in your company, or somebody else in their life and their business. So understanding that story is really important. Before we get out of here, though, I want to ask you about some specific techniques and tactics for de-escalating conflict. If we found that somebody is emotionally triggered, we find ourselves in one of these stressful situations, what are some of the tips, tools, tactics that we can use to de-escalate?
Okay, so let's go back to that yeah, but, because when you hear the but, it automatically de-emphasizes and diminishes what the other person is saying. So I always say, don't do a but, do a yet, because the yet balances both sides of the equation. So for example, when someone is saying, for sales, I can't meet that new price. And you're like, well, yeah, but you contractually, agreed to it. Or you could say, yet, this, our costs have gone up, your costs have gone up. This is, yet I can't sell this at a loss. So you can use the word yet, which tends to de-escalate it. The other, really specifically, if someone is bringing up a good point, even people who are terrible at their jobs or may not be the most accurate all the time, once in a while, they actually are accurate. And once in a while, in all of the rubbish, they make a decent point. So you can say, you know what, you do raise a good point, and you will find that really de-escalates it. However, don't say you raise a good point and then do yeah, but build on that. Yes, you do raise a good point. I am seeing that too. And this. So how can we go ahead and address? How can we potentially address this together? The other thing is, as I said before, frame things in terms of proposals. Frame things in terms of requests. So I have a request, or I'm understanding your proposal to be this, and think, at the end of the conversation, how do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel as though it was productive? Or do you want them to feel as though you were intransigent? Intransigent, that word. And so one of those things about, the yet versus the but being, you make a good point. And then also, if they are feeling really emotional about it, meaning like they are maybe highly excited about it, and you're like, oh, wait, they need to kind of go down because they're so excited about it. I don't think they're catching some specific details. So to your kind of shine the light on it point of, let's not dial down the, if they're having an intensity of like, whoa, 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 whoa. You can just simply say, hey, where's all of this intensity coming from? You seem really, passionate about this. You seem really engaged about this. I'm sensing that you're upset, or I'm sensing that you're reluctant. Help me understand where that is coming from. So it comes more from a dialogue. And sometimes you just need to be calm, cool, collected. I tell and trained new mediators of we want you to look calm, cool, and collected. And it doesn't mean, you know, putting the arms down here. It just means like, okay, I am not going to raise my voice. I am going to slow down the pace of what I am saying, so that way it is being it's being very deliberate, but it's not being, okay, Carol, this is what I hear you saying. Um, and it is allowing people to have their say. So this is kind of the last point. If someone is just talking and talking and talking and talking rather than just be quiet, calm, cool, collected, and let them finish all the way through. And then you don't need to say, okay, your point number 1 is, point number 2 is, point number 3 is. You can just say, that was a lot. What do you want me to take away from this? And then that way you are compelling them to recall and reflect about what the significance of all of that information is. And then you can simply say, okay, I think we can work with that. Do you have any requests of me? What are your proposals? And so we're going back into collaboration. We're going back into problem solving mode. And I think that's what people want. They want their problem solved. They want their issue to be addressed.
I love that. Really good stuff there. And I think for me, what I'm taking away and tying it to Sandler stuff is we talk about an emotional pendulum, that they're going to swing back and forth on different things. And you can't really fight against that. But what you can do is kind of nudge them in the opposite direction. You know, sometimes you're going to have to try some different things. You might have to get excited with them and fall on the sword and go, you're right, this is ridiculous, we screwed this up, I'm sorry. And in order to let them understand that you are with them, you've heard them, this is bad. If you keep going, no, it's not a big deal, and they go, yes, it is a big deal, they're going the opposite way. So you need to go with them. You need to say, okay, you're right, it is a big deal, but how do we bring this back? How do we resolve it and meet them where they are first? And other times it's going the opposite of saying, no, we got some real opportunities here. Or if they're getting emotional, you go unemotional, like you said, and that will stop them a little bit. And you can, I don't like the word triggered, because I think people see it as that, okay, Carol thing that you said earlier. But I think you can say something like, it sounds like you're emotional here, and I don't understand why. I don't have the backstory. Like, tell me what happened. How come you're on page 10 and I'm still on page 1 here? And you bring up kind of calm down and tell you that story.
And you bring up a good point, because one of the things that does escalate of like, don't be so emotional, you're not being logical, where it's like you're not understanding the impact of. And so one of the things I might do is switch of like, emotion, like, help me understand where the intensity of this emotion is coming from, or help me understand how this is impacting you. Because what's happening is they're having a stress response, and it's not a stress choice, it's a stress response. And so being able to really kind of acknowledge that, I think that's interesting. And you did bring up.
I just always think of the parents like at Walmart yelling at their kids, calm down. And you're like, yelling at somebody to calm down is not going to help them calm down.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So like, how can we reset this and be the calm in the situation? I love that. And I love this conversation today. Super fun. We've been talking with Carol Bowser from Conflict Management Strategies. Go to managingconflict.com for more information. And Carol, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you some cheesy job interview questions and learn a little bit more about you. At this point in your career, how do you define success for yourself?
So one of the ways in which I define it is, am I doing something where I'm feeling challenged? I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was like, for every presentation, for every client, you should try to be 10% better, which means that you're kind of learning of, what is it that I can do to be a little bit better. And it might just be, am I calmer? Do I feel more prepared? Do I feel like I had more fun with this? But people are messy, and I like being able to bring my message of managing conflict, empowering people, across industries and to various types of organizations. So that's part of the success for me.
And on the flip side, was there a failure you're most proud of, or a particularly hard lesson learned you had to get over in order to be successful?
God, God, every single day. So, so one of the things that I realized is that sometimes in wanting to help, I may get caught up in what I refer to as my client's gears, meaning that I need to remain sufficiently removed so that way I don't start getting caught up in all of the interior dynamics that I have been called in to help address. So I think that's it. And then also being told early on, like, Carol, I think you can do a lot of things. However, always remember who your client is and, make sure that you're really kind of clear on what your role is. So one of the things, it's like, oh, it's the lawyer thing of, who's the client? And I think that also helps of being able to go back and say, this is the roles, this is what I see as the parameters of my roles, which is now an insight that I bring to my clients all of the time. And every time I hear, she needs to stay in her own lane, or he needs to stay in her own lane, I'm like, let's spend a little bit of time defining what people see the roles are. So that's a lesson that is reiterated almost on a daily basis.
And last one, do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra that you try to remember?
I'm going to give a shout out to my high school English teacher. And we had to study poems and American literature and stuff, but I don't remember who it was. It might have been Emerson, but it said the heights great men attained weren't something about the heights great men achieved were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, toiled upward in the night. Meaning that it takes work. It takes work, and what would have worked 2 or 3 years ago may not work in this setting. So it's that constant idea of being curious and doing the work.
I love it. Thanks. Again, people can go to managingconflict.com if they want to find you, but can you share a little bit about how you can help us or we can help you?
Sure thing. So if people want to increase their conflict resolution muscles, they can certainly follow me on LinkedIn, where several years ago, someone said I was one of the top 30 people to follow on LinkedIn for conflict resolution. Also go and follow me on most of the social media. If you want to get a conflict tip of the day, a tip, a trick, a technique, a video link, an article, something that you as a manager or leader can digest, on a daily basis. And then also I've been told by a lot of clients that it's a little bit of a conversation starter with their team to be able to then go to managingconflict.com and click on the link for a conflict tip of the day. And I regularly speak at associations, and folks hire me to come in and help their team become more conflict competent.
I love it. Carol, thank you so much for being on the show again. You need more information on how to have these difficult conversations, specifically as they come around in business development and sales, talk to Sandler. We have a lot of free resources as well. And subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Share it with somebody that you think needs to hear it. Until next time, whatever you are, be a good one. Goodbye, everybody.